This episode's made possible by Planful. Hello, on today's episode of Planning Aces, we'll be featuring FP&A insights and commentary of three finance leaders, including CFO Scott Benyon of Paystand, CFO Christine Chambers of PetMeds, and CFO Z Lee of Customer.io. This is Jack Sweeney, your co-host, along with performance management guru Brett Knowles, who will serve as our co-host and resident thought leader as we seek to highlight the takeaways from our distinguished group of Planning Aces. We'll begin after this.
Hi, I'm Rowan Tonkin, Chief Marketing Officer at Planful, and we're a proud sponsor of CFO Thought Leader. At Planful, we're empowering teams just like yours to drive peak financial performance in every corner of your business. What sets Planful apart? We have purpose-built applications for every department, from FP&A to accounting, marketing to HR, all with built-in financial intelligence. This means we can get you up and running within weeks, and it requires minimal IT involvement. So you can rapidly and seamlessly engage everyone across the business in your key financial processes. Best of all, you can't outgrow us. We take the pain of growing away with an unmatched ability to scale with you. You have an endless runway with Planful. See why over 1,300 customers around the world choose Planful as their flexible, user-friendly, end-to-end financial performance management platform. Go to planful.com and see how you can make financial performance a team sport in your business.
Hi, it's Jack. I'm here with Brett Knowles. Brett, I want to share something with you. I was asking questions, of course, of a finance leader on a recent episode of CFO Thought Leader, where I asked him whether his FP&A team had begun using AI regularly to complete their work. And I guess the key word is regularly, because everyone can say, oh, they're dabbling, have they made it, or as you like to say, does AI have a seat at the FP&A table, I suppose? And the answer was not yet.
I think the more honest answer was not to my knowledge. If we take a look at the usage of ChatGPT and Copilot and the other AI tools, it's obviously gone nonlinear. And I've certainly not. And so that's one data point. The next data point is I have not yet been able to find a client where people haven't said, I'm dabbling in it. And then when you begin peeling back the layers, they've actually been spending hours and hours and hours doing it, using it. And either, if I were to be malicious, taking credit for the work that AI does, or wearing my green hat of creativity, it's inspiring better work from the teams that do use it. So I think it's being extensively used, but it's still only the thin edge of the wedge of what we'll see shortly.
Yes. And you say shortly, and I think it's interesting that during 2023, I think we all became aware of the speed at which the impact of AI is sort of unfolding here, more so than other technology paradigms in the past. We are tracking this month to month. So, Brett, we look forward to talking to you in 2024 as each month passes. By now, I think our listeners know well what we're up to here on Planning Aces. But as a refresh, during the course of the month, I try to capture clips of some of the more interesting thinking that was shared on CFO Thought Leader around FP&A, the function itself, the tools being used, the approaches being taken. I share them with Brett Knowles, our thought leader, or I like to say our resident thought leader, a longtime performance management consultant and guru. But Brett, as always, we begin by asking you for what you felt these three planning aces we are featuring this episode have in common. Thought it was interesting you talked about the focus on ownership of FP&A beyond the FP&A function, other components of the theme as well that you shared. But would you mind once more providing us with your thoughts as to what these three planning aces shared? And then, of course, we'll share the thinking of our actual planning aces with you. But Brett, what would you tell us?
So for the three planning aces that we have this time, what I saw was a couple of things. Most importantly, how FP&A has to draw in non-FP&A players into the FP&A process. And it's not really the FP&A process. Everyone should own financial planning and analysis. The dilemma is many organizations are leaning on us to go get that work done. And our three planning aces today talk about how to draw other people in and what the benefits of that are.
You emphasize that all three of our planning aces this episode emphasize the A as an analysis, and in particular, providing actionable analytics. Now, this isn't necessarily something new, but these are three finance leaders who, more or less, I think, like to think of themselves as champions of this area. They are, advanced in this area. No, or did you see it differently?
Perhaps people are doing that emphasis on the A. So for those of you that are, think of this as a good New Year's resolution. Just a reminder that that's one thing that we should be doing. But I do feel that we often see organizations where they rely on FP&A to do the analysis, and they just wait for it to be served up to them on a silver platter. And I think part of what we heard in the conversations today is two things. One is, yes, but invite us to the table so you can hear our analysis and allow us to nudge you towards using that to make better decisions. But secondly, think of what we do as the beginning of that thread. We're going to show you a bunch of threads to pull on. It's your job to figure out which one to pull on and how hard to pull. So some of that more detailed customer analytics that we often look at, FP&A doesn't get access to that data to begin with, and either give FP&A that access or begin taking what FP&A serves up to you and drill down on it, answer the next set of questions. So I think what we heard was that socialization of the analysis that FP&A does might be at a different level of detail or for a different purpose than the analysis that you might want to do yourself. So go beyond what we've handed you. Thank us for setting you in the right direction, but you keep the journey going.
There's some interesting thinking shared around metrics as well. I would say it may not be the main theme, but certainly another sub theme.
And I think if there were a second theme that I saw, it's all about what you and I have talked about before with other FP&A champions, and that is finding your organization's sort of unique secret key indicator or key performance index to use to monitor the performance of the organization, right? The examples we used back then were things like McDonald's have figured out it's 3 minutes for order to cash. That's not the entire value proposition, but if that part works, it's simple to extrapolate that a lot of other things had to be in place as well. So that was sort of a second theme that I saw. So I'd say that the three are drawing people in, figuring out what that key analytic is, and nudging teams to take what we do to further detail for them to operationalize the learnings that we bring to them.
Well, permit me to tee up our first planning ace, who will be Scott Benyon, CFO of Paystand. Now, CFO Benyon joined us way back on episode 925 of CFO Thought Leader during the summer months. I somehow overlooked including him in an earlier episode of Planning Aces, but I'm happy to do so now. 3-decade finance career, Brett. Goes back, interesting enough, to the desktop era. Shared some interesting thoughts. Back then, folks, if you're an FP&A, Scott was tracking the CD shipping costs related to software distribution. Not something we worry about today, but some great perspective through the years on that episode featuring Scott Bennion. Here is Scott.
Yeah, I think so. I think that the finance organization now, uh, because we do FP&A and we need to do predictions, we need to understand a little more about, the customers and what's going on. So there's more interaction, for example, with once we reveal or we have insights with data, that there are actionable next steps with, say, the customer success team. Hey, we've noticed this behavior with this customer. Is there anything going on that you're aware of? And so it knits things all together, actually. So it expands the cross company interactions and insights. And it's also insights that can be fed back into some of these organizations. Hey, we notice this customer's activity is behaving like this. Is this something that you need to attend to or are attending to? And I also find once you provide those insights, the function then takes that as kind of they level up. They say, oh, wow, we've got insight into this data and we notice a pattern. Let's just start tracking this. If we start seeing this pattern, we can take action. So it's really about, not only collecting the data and reporting the data, but then making sure to focus on actionable data and having the organization, the finance organization, help support and roll that out to the rest of the company. A lot of the ways that as finance leaders we control our businesses and we communicate what I call spending envelopes is based on benchmarks. We go out and we benchmark what companies that are successful are doing. We have Rule of 40. We have percents of revenue sort of benchmarks. I think one of the sort of strategic moments I had was not that I don't do it, but it's the way I communicate it. And it's the way I've rolled it out in the organization. So rather than going as, I've always tried not to be the finance police. I try to be sort of the finance mentor, the finance guider. So rather than roll out benchmarks and explaining, hey, you need to be at this level because of that, I've taken a different approach. I actually roll out a message of everybody in the company is a capital allocator. We're looking for investments. We look to make investments in the company, and we look for return out of the investments we make. We look for ROI out of the investments we make. So, for example, when I look at how much the R&D budget and the product budget is, I'm looking at that as an investment in product development and an ROI on the top line. So I knit together the asks of the leaders to to budget and keep themselves in budget guidelines, not from a sort of benchmark perspective, but by getting buy-in that we're all investors together in this startup company, and we're all capital allocators. So I really think and by creating that framework, it's a really powerful way then every quarter or every iteration to re-emphasize we're investing in this because of that. The budget for this is because the return on this is that. So I feel like setting the stage and creating the framework in that way early creates a powerful platform for effectively managing the business on an ongoing basis.
Wow. Just some wonderful takeaways there. I forgot how insightful CFO Bennion was when he joined us again on episode 925. Brett, what did you make of what Planning Ace Scott Bennion shared?
The nugget I would take, if I only could take away one thing, I really loved his statement that everyone is a capital allocator. What's brilliant about that is it puts the mindset on everyone, not just FP&A. So we're often seen as the police people and the evil guarders of the budget. And he's saying, no, we all own that. We happen to support it, give you the mathematics, the analytics, and so on. But we need to change this mindset so that everyone owns it and the ROI and everything else. And he likened that to what a startup company is like. And I thought that was a nice way to position getting other people to level up with the actionable data that we've given them.
That sense of that collective responsibility, fostering that is not always something finance can do well, but this seems like a really nice approach.
Well, I think there's two parts to it, right? So FP&A, our controlling the budgets is wonderful because that gives us all sorts of power and authority, and it helps us get way better Christmas gifts from our colleagues because they want to buy our love. No, that's not the case, but it gives us a certain power and authority to say, well, no, we're all accountable for that capital allocation. Is kind of giving power away from us, and that's kind of a tough thing to do. The mindset is correct, and I think if you can implement that, it's almost like open book management. You end up with a much better decision making because it's not FP&A making decisions on behalf of your department. You've got way more depth and understanding inside your department of how best to allocate funds. But we need you to take ownership of those funds so that you're not wasting money. The dilemma still is a dollar spent in one department might earn me back $1.50. That same dollar spent in another department might earn me back $10. So I can optimize inside of my zone of control. I can't optimize across departments. So FP&A still has to do that big optimization, but helping people take ownership of the optimization inside their department is a great move.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the finance leaders we've spoken with in the past had told us that they had done, just touching on that cultural aspect here again, they had done educational initiatives to educate different departments as to whether it was a particular metric or a capital allocation, just helping them understand better why that's a wise investment and why that wasn't. But taking the time to create actual curriculums to educate different departments, being sensitive to the skill sets that those people have and what their understanding of business might be.
Right. And I think that's a super important takeaway that, yes, with all great intention, we'd love to make those things happen, but they're not going to happen by themselves. They're not going to happen if we make a nice PowerPoint deck that says it. Things like setting up a curricula, doing lunch and learns, hand-holding people as they begin taking that more detailed look at the analytics and help them get started are all great moves to shift this from being a happy platitude to actually being enabled in the organization.
Nice. Well, our next planning ace is CFO Christine Chambers of PetMeds, who recently joined us on episode 960 of CFO Thought Leader. CFO Chambers arrived in the United States from London way back when as a financial analyst and climbed the FP&A ranks at Real Networks out of Seattle. Here's what CFO Chambers shared with us.
There's one that really comes to mind. I think it is a key metric and a simple metric that both helps externally investors as well as internally the team align to, creating that kind of North Star. And the one that stands out for me, a key metric, is really this sort of LTV to CAC, lifetime value to cost to acquire, which is, in the very simplest terms, I think of the growth and the success of the organization as being able to drive more volume at a higher rate. And the way this translates, what I mean by that is that we look at, and no matter where you are in the organization, you should be able to find a metric that supports this Uber metric, the LTV to CAC. So the way I think about it is the cost to acquire traffic to our site, quality traffic to our site, that then converts into orders at an average order value. And that I think of as a kind of unit economics or rate. And whether you're in marketing or you're on the site, working on the site, or you're in finance, there are metrics within that sort of, as you peel that back, that people can relate to that help improve this LTV to CAC. So as we think about the traffic coming in, the conversion, the average order value, I then think of one additional component, which we're really leaning into as an organization, which is around ordership and driving this sort of membership model whereby you then bring somebody into your ecosystem and then they come back time and time again. So you create this recurring revenue stream. Again, if you think about that, and this whole life cycle is ultimately leads to the lifetime value, the LTV of that customer. I like CAC as well because that then helps from a margin perspective understand the cost to acquire that customer and then the lifetime value. So again, going back to in the very simplest form, that LTV to CAC ratio really helps drive both, like I say, internally and externally, the success and growth of the organization and the margins associated with that as you continue to strive to drive top line growth and then margin growth as well. Earlier this year, we actually acquired, and I can give a demonstration, maybe might be helpful to understand how we've been operating that. But earlier this year, we acquired a company, which is really a smaller version of PetMeds called PetCareRx. A fantastic team based out of Long Island, New York. And although a smaller version of PetMeds, they have a premium food component to their business that drives about 50% of their business. So they're not just medication. They're about 50% medication and 50% sort of premium food. It was a great acquisition for PetMeds because PetMeds, on the other hand, is predominantly medication. And so as we think about the acquisition and the adoption of their catalog onto the PetMeds customers, we really see the opportunity to grow a bigger share of that pet parent's wallet by adding food, not only to their basket, but also increasing the number of times that they come back. And you take, for example, a customer, you probably buy your flea and tick medication in the spring for your pets. By bringing them in and selling food, we're also able to drive a bigger basket and that sort of recurring revenue stream. Ultimately, I think about that as then lifetime value and the cost to acquire. So getting back to, key metric, that's really one that resonates for me.
Okay. Among other things, some great perspective on LTV to CAC. Brett, what did you make of what CFO Chambers shared with us?
Right. I thought that was fun when she told us, that ratio LTV to CAC, because again, it reflects back on some of the previous podcasts we've had where it seems like that's one of the jobs of FP&A, to identify what is that super secret metric that allows us to differentiate ourselves from this crowded marketplace and what that looks like. And the story that she had about acquiring a high-end dog food or animal food company as a tool to get better lifetime value is a great example of once you get that driver, it now informs decisions. Like that acquisition a year ago might not have looked of interest to them because they don't do that. That acquisition doesn't do RX or drugs, prescription stuff for animals. But they do something that is going to drive their key metric, lifetime value, even though it doesn't look like it fits inside the company's strategy or paradigm.
So, Brett, do you have a pet?
We train seeing eye dogs, so we have many pets.
Do you really? Wow.
Yeah, let me be perfectly clear. If I had the chance to do it over again, I would have become a vet because there's no question. There's no limit to the amount of money that we'll spend on our pets. Like I'll go without a good dinner, just to make sure my dog gets what my dog needs. So she's found the right place to hang out for sure. But what's interesting is it's almost like, we did a bunch of work with Burger King when they began trying to sell breakfast food. It's tough when your company's name is Burger King to begin selling breakfast food. Pet meds, unfortunately, the name puts them in a category of meds. And so that's why I say within its strategy or its initial direction, this is a bit of a stretch. But um, and that's what's brilliant about, for example, McDonald's. It's like it's non-committal about what the heck that
Right.
organization does.
Right.
In this case, one without access to Christine's secret metric of LTV to CAC, that acquisition wouldn't have been of interest. Now that now you begin moving towards that key metric, all of a sudden the acquisition makes sense. And this is a case where that key metric might even drive a change in the name of the organization. Like they might decide eventually to change it from Pet Meds to something that allows them to keep chasing LTV a bit harder.
Yeah, from what I understand, the company is more than 20 years of age, so it goes back to that .com era.
So it's clearly had a few evolutionary chapters already.
Sure, absolutely. And the dilemma is a sales marketing one about, does the name PetMed limit your reach, and is the benefit you get from changing the name worth the cost, and all that kind of good stuff. Like some time ago, Staples bought a company called Business Depot, and for about 5 years they kept both names. And gradually I've noticed that they've silently got rid of the Business Depot one, but it took them a long time to decide that the Staples name now have better brand equity than the Business Depot, and you can sort of weed that away.
The way she shared with us her formula reveals sort of how it transcends FP&A, that this is not just an FP&A metric or effort.
Right. In fact, she spelled us out that entire formula. She said, so, if I think of that LTV to CAC, sort of CAC is the beginning of it. But then the next step in her mental flow chart that she described was we now need to focus on average order value. And how do I drive up the average order value? Because obviously that's reducing the CAC number, but also leading us towards an LTV number. So her 3 steps were CAC to order value to ownership, which in her mind is about securing the revenue stream, and that moves you to LTV. So she's got this sort of mental game of chess, or a value stream that we move an opportunity through. So I acquire them, then I get a larger order value, and eventually they become a loyal customer that keeps returning, right? I get the recurring revenue, and that's what drives LTV. And her nudging to the staff was, now that you understand that the big metric, your job is to drill down each avenue. How do I get a higher order value? And she didn't link it, but in my mind, the example she gave of the acquisition pushes up the order value, because now I'm going to buy the drugs and some food. So without having to acquire a new customer, the CAC doesn't change, average order value goes up. And so she didn't bring it forward as an example of that, but that was, again, the type of behavior that you want to trigger.
Well, our next planning ace is CFO Z Lee of Customer.io. And as you'll hear, he begins our conversation sharing what I thought was an interesting emphasis on managing cloud expenses and how the FP&A team got involved with that task. Here is CFO Z Lee from episode 956 of CFO Thought Leader.
So, like one good example I would say is, so we, being a cloud company, we use Google Cloud. They do our hosting. So obviously it's a big expense from a finance perspective that we manage. But it's basically owned and controlled and operated by the engineering team. So we look at it very closely together. So from my perspective, I work with the Google partner. We look at the pricing. We look at any long-term partnership, relationship, or arrangement to get more favorable terms. But at the same time, I work with the CTO very closely, and then their team on the site reliability side to look at how are we allocating the resources. Are any of the new initiatives driving usage to the expectation that we have, or is there some other things that change? Like most recently, actually, we discover there's new pricing change from Google, which then we were able to spot it right away and talk about what's going on with this increase here. And then we were able to determine, hey, given the new pricing that they put on us, we will reconfigure, these, the way we do storage and taking snapshots in a more efficient way. And then we can bring down the cost, as a result of that. So it's a constant kind of exchange of information so that we can get the optimized cost structure. Yeah, we're spending a lot of time right now on a more comprehensive view of pipeline. So this is a fresh in my mind, where oftentimes when you have a fast growing company, you probably don't have very consistent data, or it's because you just recently migrated your CRM from Close.io to Salesforce, for example, or you changed the sales team, so the stages and definitions are all different. So we were actually in similar situation where we have data, but it's hard to actually look at it on a consistent basis and then try to do good analytics on it. So how do we kind of look at it and figure out progression of the pipeline? What is the coverage and what is the aging? Are we truing up the different probabilities at each month of the snapshot and figure out how mature they are? So because what we want to get to is the increased visibility of, if we go into a quarter with this X amount of pipeline, we should know, given historical coverage and certain progression, conversions, we should know that we are going to be at this range of closed bookings. So we want to get to that. And historically, it's hit or miss. So we definitely want to get better by looking at the pipeline and start to really have, finance team, the data team, sales and marketing, that kind of look at it consistently. And then the other benefit to that also is that it also goes upstream, where you drive accountability on the marketing lead gen side. So if we say we need X dollar of pipeline, you actually need to do certain things 3 months ago to do a campaign to generate these leads that flows through to drive these pipeline, which then will close. So I think there's a lot more kind of visibility and accountability that we can get from there. But we're not perfect in it, but it's definitely something that I'm trying to drive and get more visibility.
Well, thank you, CFO Lee. Brett, what did you make of our third planning ace?
Again, role of FP&A is to have your finger on multiple pulses. So he gave us a story about the relationship with Google and how Google's changing their prices, and his role in FP&A to help the organization understand what are the implications of the price change, and therefore what different decisions they might make. So again, analysis is giving us what you take a look at. How do I pass that to the other department and help them make the right decisions based on what FP&A delivers to them? And he came up with the example of they're changing their storage to cut down the Google cost, and also what he called snapshots. I'm not sure what those are, but obviously there's something that Customer.io collects that is causing their Google prices to go up. So that optimization of the cost structure is what he's passed on based on his analysis. What's interesting is he moved from that cost basis to now revenue. And he said, we also need a more comprehensive view of our pipeline and tracking, the changes that happen in sales. And again, that's the question of where does FP&A's job end? But now he's realized that sales has advocated ownership of that analytics, and it ends up being in the FP&A world as opposed to being in the sales world. So sometimes it's almost like a parent. If you keep on making your kids' bed, they'll never learn how to make their bed. If you keep on doing all the analytics for your departments, they're going to depend on you to do it. You can't make the quality of decisions they can because they know the day-to-day minutia that you don't. And so it's being an armchair quarterback. So I think a little bit of what I heard behind the message from Z was that consternation of what happens when you don't pass the accountability over.
Nice. Well, it's been good talking to you, Brett. As always, this being the holiday season, this is where I get to ask you to put a bow on it for us, wrap things up. Again, just to comment on the three together, some of the underlying themes. What sticks in your mind?
Sure. I think the most important takeaway may or may not be something that we're all currently practicing, and that is leading the rest of the organization to be proponents and supporters and owners of FP&A activity. In other words, we've got to do that big top level, understand where the big chunks of opportunity are, but we've got to somehow or the other pass the ball to each department so that they can drill it down in the minutia that they need to execute and then feed that back up to us. So it's almost that concept that we heard of everyone is a capital allocator. How do we share the ownership of FP&A? And it's our job to just be great coaches to the rest of the organization.
Do you expect to get back in the travel lane in early January, or will it be coming a little later for you?
I'm going straight from enjoying the warm sands of Florida to work. So on January 9th, we're heading on the first business flight of the year. So it's not a new high bar, but it's pretty close. The first full week of business, we've back to earning airline points. So hopefully 2024 is another year of earning an airline status.
Well, we look forward to catching up with you throughout 2024 and continuing our conversations about planning ACES with you.
Okay, likewise. See you.
On behalf of Brett Knowles and myself, we hope you have a happy and healthy 2024 and your year gets off to a great start. As always, at Planning ACES, we say thank you for listening.